Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to teach you how to draw this beautiful hydrangea flower. And we're going to get started first with our pencil guide. And for the hydrangea, we're going to draw a very large gumdrop because hydrangeas are made up of a bunch of tiny different flowers in a ball shape or kind of like a large bulb. And so this gumdrop is going to be the overall shape of our flower that's going to be made up with all those tiny little flowers. I'm also taking a second to kind of pre-sketch the stem and where I want the leaves to be. And don't worry if you can't see this step super well. I will end up doing the whole video in pen just so that you guys can see it better, but I recommend you guys following along in pencil and then inking it at the very end. And so the next step is going to be draw all the little circles of where we're going to want those flowers to be. And my biggest tip here is to make them actual full circles kind of towards the center, and as you near the edges, making them ovals and then eventually very skinny ovals, just because of the way perspective and foreshortening works. Don't worry if you didn't place your circles exactly where I placed mine. That's not important. But the pen we're going to use today is a King Art ink line pen. And I'm going to first sketch out the 4 main flowers that we're going to draw. And so the hydrangea, the flowers all look the same. They have 4 different petals. And so I'm going to zoom in here so that you guys can see it a little bit better. But pretty much I'm going to draw 4 small flowers, and we're going to draw these over and over again, kind of alternating between each one in order to make up the full hydrangea. And so this first flower, it's going to be more from like a front view or a top view where you can see all the petals perfectly, but you can also add slight folds to these in order to kind of change it up a little bit. And the way you do that is just add an extra line along the edge. And so this next flower is going to be from a slight side view. We can still see the center. And so we're going to draw kind of a curved line, but we're not going to finish it because we're going to add a fold, and then the top petal is actually going to be kind of nestled in it, and that is why I didn't want to finish curving it until you draw that second petal. And from here it's going to be very similar to the top one where you're drawing the 2 other petals. So our third flower is going to look a little bit funny, and that is because this is the one that's going to be drawn along the edge of that gumdrop, the one that looks very oval. And so we're going to draw the little circle oval, and then I want all the petals to look very flattened. And so this petal, or sorry, this flower, we're seeing it almost from the side, but not quite. And so that's why it looks so thin, and this is the one you're going to do along the edge. This fourth one is also kind of going to be used towards the edge, and this one is kind of from the side view. We can't see the center because one of those petals is folding upward and kind of blocking it from us, but it is going to be very oval shaped as opposed to more of a circle like the top ones were. We are going to be using these 4 flowers as our building blocks for our hydrangea, and so we're going to alternate adding them to the gumdrop. And an important thing is that you can actually flip them, right? So like I added the fold on that second flower on the left, you can add it on the right, you can add those little extra folds to the petals on the top one, and that way you're changing it up because we don't want all the little flowers to look the same because then it's going to look unrealistic. But just adding slight variations will add that more realistic feel to your flower. We're going to get started by drawing a few of the top variation of the flower because in a hydrangea there's going to be a lot of overlap, and so there's only going to be a few who you can see all the petals perfectly, and the rest are going to be kind of stacked in front or behind the other ones. And so I'm drawing just a few full shapes in order to use them as a guide to start building off the rest. Once you have drawn 2 or 3 to be your guide petals, this is when you can start adding the variations of the other flowers. And I would kind of wait to use the bottom 2 until you're kind of closer to the edge, but definitely alternate from the top 2 a lot here and making sure that you're flipping them, adding those folds, making some slightly bigger, some slightly smaller in order to add that variety. Sometimes after you draw a flower, you might see that there is just a little bit of space in between the 2 different flowers and not enough room to add maybe another full flower. But that is after you have drawn the majority of them, then we're going to draw kind of little glimpses of other flowers that are hidden behind. And so don't worry about those spaces. We're definitely going to fill them in at the very end. I'm really sorry that my hand got in the way in part of this video, but don't worry, I'm not doing anything that I can't explain. I'm literally just using those 4 flowers that we drew in the very beginning and alternating them. And now that I'm getting closer to the edge on this side, I can actually start drawing the bottom 2 variations, and that way those flowers, because they're curving away from us, right, we're only seeing more from the side instead of kind of the full frontal view. And don't worry if you mess up on a flower or a petal. The imperfections are actually such a wonderful part of nature, because natural imperfections happen in nature. Wind, animals, disease, you know, water, things happen where each petal or each flower might get slight imperfections, and so those imperfections are actually making your flower and your hydrangea look more realistic. So definitely don't let it get you down. And plus, with you having to draw probably 30 flowers on this hydrangea, it's going to be hidden, so no need to worry too much. And make sure that you take your time as you're drawing all of these petals. I draw flowers every day, so I might be doing a little bit faster than you feel is comfortable. So feel free to pause if you need to. And also, like I mentioned in the beginning, make sure that you're using a pencil. I'm only using a pen so that you guys can see it better on the video, just because pencil sometimes doesn't show up as well. And with pencil, you can definitely erase if you need to. And so just keep drawing, take your time, and as you start filling up your hydrangea, you can actually start filling in those little gaps by drawing, you know, partial flowers, whether it just be the center or just a petal. And so this might get a little bit confusing when you're adding the detail lines, but when we add the detail lines, we'll do 1 flower at a time. That way those partial flowers in the back don't confuse you. Make sure that you flip your paper as you start going around. I know that sometimes drawing flowers from different angles is difficult, so if you're really good at drawing it from one angle, then flip the page so that you're drawing it from the same angle every single time and still adding that variation, because it's always better to turn your paper than it is to try to flip your wrist all the way around, because then your lines will get wobbly and not as strong. I want to apologize once again for my hand getting in the way, but just as you are nearing the end and as you're nearing the edge, make sure that you add more of that variation from the bottom too, and then go back and start filling in those little gaps with little petals and little folds and different things like that that are kind of peeking through. And then we will get started on the leaves and the stem, and then the last part that we're going to do is going to be the detail lines. I'm going to speed up this last part just a little bit, just because it is all a lot of the same and I want to get to the next part. And so after you have drawn most of this, the flowers, go along the edge and just draw what looks like random little petals, just because you might not see the full flower, but you might see a few petals peeking through. And so just add some little random ones along the edge. Make sure that you have filled in those gaps, and then we can get started on the stem. So for our stem, we're going to have 1 large stem coming off from the center, and then we're going to have 2 small branches kind of coming off from the top. And so just add 2 little lines like this to make kind of like a triangle, making sure that they come off different parts of the stem. And so our hydrangea leaves, they have serrated edges, so make sure that they aren't straight. So serrated edges, and they should be a little bit fatter. So I don't want you to feel nervous at all about the angle of the leaves that I'm going to draw. All you have to do is kind of draw like a flatter version of a top of a heart, and then do the serrated edges to a point, and then draw a curved line from that center of the heart top all the way to that corner, kind of like this. And this will give you a nice angle of a leaf that isn't flat but kind of looking like it's curving towards us. And we're going to repeat the same thing with this other leaf, making it just a little bit smaller with kind of that little heart top, and then with a curved line going to the tip. If you're still here watching this video, I just want to say thank you so much for sticking with it. I know that this is a little bit more of a time-consuming flower, but you are doing so well and you are putting the time in to get better and to improve your skills. And so you got this. As for the detail lines, this part will also be time-consuming just because there are so many flowers. But I definitely recommend that you are minimalistic in your detail lines, maybe 3 or 4 kind of coming from the center, just because you don't want to overdo it. It's already gonna look very clustered and close together, and so if you add too many detail lines, then you risk making your flower look just crowded. So hopefully that helps. And I'm going to speed up the detail lines here, the detail part here in a bit, just so that we're not here until, you know, next Wednesday. But thank you for being here. Adding detail lines is so time consuming, but I love seeing my art just come to life. You can really tell the difference between the ones I've added the detail lines and the ones that I haven't. It just looks more realistic. It looks so alive and I just love it. So I hope that you guys are seeing a difference in your hydrangea as you're adding the detail lines. In each of my videos, I always like to share my biggest tips for detail lines. It is a very simple thing, but it is also very easy to mess it up just because small things make a big difference. And so my biggest tips for detail lines is number 1, to add a variety in the length of your lines. Even if you're only drawing 3 lines, you want to make sure that they're maybe slightly different lengths just because you don't want it to look super static. And my second tip is to add a little bit of curve to your lines. Normal petals, they fold and they curve, and you want to be able to mimic that with your lines, because if you make them straight, it's going to look like a piece of wood, you know, nice and flat and not curved at all. And so make sure that you add that curve. And another tip is, if you're using a reference photo, look at the natural veins of the flower. These natural veins will be the biggest indicator of where the perfect spot is for a detail line. So observation is super crucial when you're drawing flowers, especially from reference photos. And so yeah, those are my biggest tips, and I hope that you find them helpful as you create your own flowers, not just this hydrangea, but any other flower that you draw. Alright, now it is time to add detail lines to your leaves. We're gonna keep it kind of simple, but making sure that you are adding slight curves. And so I actually like to do lines both from the center and a little bit from the edge, especially on those little serrated points of the edge, making little lines coming in and making sure that they're all curving kind of parallel to each other. You don't want the curves to be completely wonky and different from each other. Once you have finished all your detail lines, both on your leaves and your flowers, then you're ready to erase all of your pencil lines and be able to see the beautiful flower that you have created. I hope that you found this tutorial helpful, and I hope you come back next Friday for the next flower tutorial. Thank you, bye!